All right, it's 5 o'clock. We'll call this meeting of the City Plan Commission to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Here.
Mr. Frederick?
Here.
Mr. Piles? Mr. Caprillion?
Here.
Ms. Besler?
Here.
Ms. Spieth?
Here.
And Madam Mayor is your seventh member who is absent tonight.
Okay. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second. O'Reilly. Next item is approval of minutes from the September 19th.
Let's vote on that.
Oh, yeah, let's vote on approving the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Now we can move on. Approval of the minutes from the September 19th meeting.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Next item, identify potential conflicts of interest. Please be advised per city policy 3.340 that any member of the body shall declare a conflict if they have an interest, financial or otherwise, direct or indirect, or engage in a business or transaction or professional activity, or incur an obligation of any nature that is in conflict with the proper discharge of the body's official duties. Do we have any conflicts of interest to declare tonight? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 6, citizen comments. Please keep in mind, if you're here for any particular issue, you'll have an opportunity to speak when that agenda item comes up. But if we have any other citizens' comments, we'll take those now. There's a sheet. Okay. These all seem to be regarding specific issues on the agenda. So we'll move on to item number 7. Conditional use permit amendment request by Jeremy Brown of Merriwood Construction, representing Dental Crafters. It's a request to amend the previous conditional use permit site plan to expand the parking lot to the north and for an amendment to the parking area landscaping exception for the property located at 1000 Corporate Drive, parcel 33-03548Q, zone CMU community mixed use. Presenter is Bryce Hembrook, planner.
Thank you. So the subject property is located at 1000 Corporate Drive, which is located within the Mill Creek Business Park. It is on the south side of the city. It is approximately 3.25 acres, and Dental Crafters is exploring expanding their footprint to the north. So they would also expand their parking lot. So the parking lot on the east side would expand to the north by about 4,400 square feet, or about 16 total parking stalls. So in 2018, Dental Crafters received a conditional use permit to allow for an exception to the typical requirement for landscape islands. So generally, for a new parking lot, every 12 parking stalls, there's supposed to be a island, landscaping island or peninsula. They received an exception to go 14 stalls without one, and now they are looking to extend that, as well as we have to review the site plan since this is different than what was originally proposed. So the applicant, as I mentioned, is adding about 16 parking stalls. They will be adding some landscaping, which meets the landscaping code requirements for the parking lot. The one exception would be the landscape island that they will not be. So as you can see here, the expansion will be to the north, and there will not be any included here. So ultimately, they would be looking for an exception of 23 parking stalls in a row without a landscape island, as opposed to the previously approved 14 parking stalls. The subject property, as I mentioned, is located in the business park, which has additional covenants and restrictions. There is mention of having landscape areas in the parking area. So as part of this review, I included in one of my conditions that the applicant would go without a landscape island. However, they should provide a fourth landscape area on the east side of the parking lot. This would match the three other that are to the south. I suggested that they could include, that the Plan Commission could consider requiring that landscape area would be proposed around the proposed light pole. So one of the reasons why landscape islands are required is because it's one way for the city to try to enhance the aesthetics along commercial corridors and other parts of the city. In this case, the business park is located, or the business is located near only a couple other buildings. It's kind of in a corner of the city. There's not a lot of through traffic. It's only people that are going to, these jobs or to go to an office within this area. So they don't feel that there's a need to include those landscape islands if no one's going to be, looking at them anyway. The other reason that they cited, which is pretty common for this type of exception request, is that adding these islands is difficult for snow removal. This creates additional challenges. And so that's one of the other reasons why they made this request. With that, I recommended to approve this request with the following conditions and exceptions. Number one, the maximum number of parking stalls in a row without a landscape island or peninsula shall be 23 stalls for the new parking area. Number two, the applicant shall add a fourth landscape area to along the east side of the parking lot near the proposed light pole instead of installing landscape island. This landscape island shall generally match the other three landscape areas along the parking lot. Number three, a final landscaping plan shall be submitted and reviewed and approved by staff. And number four, minor adjustments to the site plan to be approved administratively, provided no other exceptions are required. That's all that I have.
Okay, thank you, Bryce. This item does require a public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to address the Plan Commission? Anyone that would like to address the commission? Anyone that would like to address the...
I'm trained now. Good? All right. Andy Wilkins from Dental Crafters. Thanks. We just purchased that 1 acre slice to the north in the city-owned parcel. I think Bryce summed it up perfectly. But if you guys have any questions of me, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay. Thank you. We'll entertain a motion from the commission. Mr. O'Reilly?
I'll make a motion to proceed with the conditions that Bryce had brought forward. I think they're logical.
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. You want to do roll call vote or just voice vote? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item number 8 is a conditional use permit request by Brandon Pinkert of Marshfield Handyman Services LLC, representing Dana's Serendipity House LLC, to consider allowing a community living arrangement facility, 4 bedrooms, with exceptions to the following. Section 18-5711A requiring community living arrangements to be separated by at least 2,000 feet. Section 18-5711B, which requires the population of all community living arrangements in the city to not exceed 1% of the city's and aldermanic district population. And Section 18-5711D, requiring each facility to have rear and side yard, which is visually screened from abutting residential properties. The subject property is located at 3214 Manville Lane, parcel 250-2602-253-1002, zoned neighborhood mixed use. Presenter is Bryce Hembrook, planner.
Thank you. So the subject property is located on the northwest side of the city, in between, not quite in between, but off of Manville as well as Veterans Parkway. The parcel is approximately 0.84 acres. The building used to be used as a church until about, I believe it was about 4 or 5 years ago, it was converted into a single family residence. So it has the appearance of institutional or commercial type use. However, it has been used as a single family residence in the recent past. The applicant is requesting to operate a community living arrangement, a CLA facility with 4 beds. So typically, so the property is zoned neighborhood mixed use, NMU, and generally this type of use would be permitted by right within the district. However, there's additional regulations that apply for CLAs, and so they need some exceptions to at least 2 of those. So with that, the mobile home park is located to the north. There is a commercially zoned property to the west, however, that is a single family residence. And then to the southeast, there is a single family home, and that is zoned single family residential. So this is kind of a interesting area with a mix of uses. There is also to my knowledge, there's still a community living arrangement across the street, across Manville to the east. So that is about, I believe it's about 75 feet away. Here's a picture of what the property looks like from Veterans Parkway. I was not able to grab a picture from Manville, but this is kind of what you would see on the highway. And ultimately, this is the floor plan showing the 4 beds. There will be an office space, kitchen, living space, etc. So some of the requirements that require exceptions. One of the first regulation is that no CLAs shall be established within 2,000 feet of any other such facility, regardless of its capacity. As I had mentioned, across the street, there is one, and there's also, I think, several others that are within that 2,000 foot requirement. This is pretty common. This is a pretty common requested exception for CLAs within Marshfield. There are quite a lot of them. So there's been, a good amount that have been approved in the past. One of the other requirements is that the applicant shall demonstrate that the total capacity of all CLAs in the city shall not exceed 1% of the city's population, as well as 1% of the aldermanic district's population. In this case, essentially any new proposed CLA exceeds the city's population. The city's population was officially 18,929 in the 2020 census. Thus, they would only be allowed 189 beds within the city. Currently, our records show that there would be 307 beds if this were to be approved. So ultimately, any new CLA has to receive an exception to this request. The aldermanic district is also exceeded. I believe there's about 108 beds within District 2, which is where this property is located, and they would be allowed about 18 beds, typically according to the requirement. One of the things that I added in the heading as well as in the staff report is that it talks about there's an additional requirement for each facility shall have a rear and side yard, which is visually screened from any abutting residential properties unless such facility is contained within a single family dwelling. So I just wanted to include that because the way that I am interpreting it is it was most recently used as a single family residence, even though the appearance looks more of a church. So in my opinion, it doesn't necessarily need to meet that requirement. However, the Planning Commission can, ultimately decide to require landscaping or fencing along residential properties they see fit. The applicant did mention that they were exploring the option of including some sort of screening or fencing, but they didn't propose any plans at this time. In terms of parking, there is a parking lot that was used for the church. there's about 30 parking stalls provided. They would need about 5 parking stalls to meet the requirement, so they're well over that requirement. And with that, one of the goals in the comprehensive plan was to monitor the need for additional programs and housing options. And so the plan established the following housing policy for the assisted living sector to continue to consider special needs housing, such as CBRS, based on the community need, impact on neighborhood, physical design, and the availability of existing facilities. So with this, we feel like this is an appropriate location. It's located technically within a mixed-use district, which allows commercial and residential, but it's also kind of a neighborhood, somewhat of a neighborhood feel with residential properties nearby. So with those considerations, the recommendation would be that this to approve the conditional use permit request with the following conditions or exceptions. This conditional use permit shall expire if the proper license to establish a 4-bed facility is not obtained within 12 months of common council approval. If the license is not maintained within 12 months of common council approval, the license is not maintained for a period of 12 or more consecutive months, it will be void. Number 2, the facility is permitted an exception to the 2,000 foot separation requirement and may exceed the 1% of population requirement. Number 3, screening is not required but encouraged along the side or rear yards. Number 4, minor site plan changes may be administratively approved as long as the changes do not result in the property becoming non-compliant with this CUP or with any other code requirement. And that's all I have for that one.
Thank you, Bryce. Okay, this item does require a public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to address the Plan Commission? Is there anyone here that would like to address the Plan Commission? Is there anyone here that would like to address the Plan Commission? Okay, hearing none, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion
Mr.
to
O'Reilly.
approve with all recommendations that Bryce mentioned.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, discussion. Any question? No? Okay. Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item number 9, conditional use permit request by Matthew Sampson to consider allowing a conditional home occupation to allow a gunsmithing business on the residential property located at 608 North Schmidt Avenue, parcel 33-06454, zoned SR3 single family residential. Presenter Bryce Hembrook, planner.
All right, thank you. So the subject property is located at 608 North Smith, which is located on the west side of the city. The parcel is approximately 0.7 acres and currently consists of a single family residence. The applicant is requesting to operate a conditional home occupation out of his residence, thus this request. The home occupation would consist of repairing and restoring firearms by appointment only, and there would be no sales on site. Now, on my staff report, I did not mention it because I didn't quite see it on the application, but the applicant would be transferring firearms, which he does have a federal firearms license that would allow for that. Now, I guess there's a difference between a sale of the gun and the transferring, so I may let the applicant speak on that or even the attorney. But for now, I'll kind of go on with some of the other things that I want to highlight. So earlier in 2023 of this year, it was about spring, the applicant reached out to me and asked me what the requirements are for the home occupation. Unfortunately, I misinterpreted the ordinance and considered this to be a minor home occupation. So when there's a requested home occupation in Marshfield, there's 2 different categories. There's a minor home occupation and a conditional home occupation. And a minor home occupation, sorry, lost my stuff here. A conditional home occupation allows for home businesses to sell items on site to customers while a minor home occupation is limited to service-oriented businesses and businesses that generate virtually no customer visits. So generally, when you have more sales, you have conditional home occupation requirements. If you have, very limited, client visitors, generally minor home occupation. Unfortunately, I didn't notice that there was a requirement that says that gunsmithing would not be considered minor home occupation and would be conditional use. So I reached out to the applicant about last month at this time and told them that we'll have to go through the conditional home occupation and that I completely missed that step. So with that, the applicant did receive a federal firearms license and started the business without, knowing that he had to go through this step due to my error. So ultimately, the applicant is proposing or will repair and restore firearms with no sale of firearms. He expects about 1 to 3 appointments per week. The applicant would operate the business from his house, not within the garage, but within the house, within the basement. And there would be, so this is what the residence looks like from the outside. There would not be any signage for the business itself. We received a couple calls asking about the sign that's out there, and upon review, it looks like that's not related to the business itself, and so we wouldn't have the ability to, say no sign for that. If you were to advertise for this business, that would not be. The applicant did mention that there is a cage that he stores the guns in. There are locks to this. There are also locks in order to get into the workshop area where he would store this. And the applicant does have a home security system that monitors inside and outside. There will not be any additional employees at all. And one thing to keep in mind is that the purpose of this request is to consider whether or not this home occupation should be allowed on the specific property. In terms of home occupations, 1 to 3 clients per week is pretty minimal. That doesn't really impact traffic. There won't be any sound issues that arise from this, and there will be no exterior alterations or signage. I do also want to note for the Planning Commission that state statutes do talk about if you decide to approve or deny conditional use permit and decide to add conditions to said permit, these conditions or the approval or denial must be supported by substantial evidence. Substantial evidence includes facts and information and does not include personal preferences or speculation. So with this, ultimately, the use of the property will still remain predominantly a single family, but you would just do some repair work, some cleaning of the guns using standard gun oil. And no additional services will really be needed in terms of, electrical or anything like that. So with that, my recommendation was to approve the request with the following conditions. Number 1, no on-site signage shall be permitted for this conditional home occupation. Number 2, business operations are limited to repairing and restoring. And I added, sorry, did not include this. I added a transferring into this condition. So they would be limited to repairing, transferring, and restoring firearms and administrative duties such as phone calls, emails, setting up appointments, and other similar activities. Number 3, sale of firearms is prohibited under this conditional use permit. 4, failure to obtain a federal firearm license would make this null and void. He's already obtained that. Number 4, failure by the applicant to meet the requirements of the license or any other required local, state, or federal licenses or permits will cause the conditional use permit to be null and void. And number 6, any significant changes to the federal firearm license will require review of this conditional use permit. I would also like to add that he did include his license and his registration as well. So with that, that's all that I have. I believe that the applicant is there, so you may be able to answer some questions, but that is all I have for that topic.
Okay, thank you, Bryce. This item does require a public hearing, so if there's anyone that would like to address the Plan Commission, we can do so now. I do have a sign-in sheet here, so we'll start with this. Okay, sounds good. So first up, I have Nathan Schreiber. Yep. And when you get to the podium, please state your name and address for the record.
Okay, is that, oh, that's better. Okay. Nathan Schreiber, I live at 1206 West Jefferson Street. So a couple blocks, block and a half, 2 blocks away from this residence. And I'm pretty sure I had a public speaking nightmare about this very scenario. So anyway, so thanks for getting me up here to face my fear today. So in any case, I think first, my biggest regret is that I haven't been able to really hear much about this or anything until just the last few days. And I'm glad Mr. Sampson's here today. I got a chance to speak with him a little bit earlier, which I think was very helpful. I think the biggest concerns that I have are related to the Google Business or Google Maps business listing, which I think sounds like he's pretty amenable to changing. One of the issues being that it's listed as having, in-store shopping from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., which I think should be pretty easy to change. But I think that would be helpful because one of my concerns is about traffic in the area, and just having a business that looks like it's open on Google Maps would increase that. Another of the things on there was that the address is also listed, kind of relating to the traffic issue. And I'm nearly certain that you can list as like a service area without a specific address, which again, he said he would be amenable to change. And from my standpoint, I think that would be helpful. And I know to have an address, you're supposed to have like a sign and everything anyway, which I think there was like a flag picture, which would be easy to take that down from the Google site, depending in terms of signage issues. So those are kind of the main things that I had thought about. The transfer issue, I'm glad that was brought up because that I hadn't seen listed. And, I think that mainly there were a lot of questions that came up and not a lot of notification. In our area, I think we're outside of the area that had to be notified, from my understanding. So those are kind of the big things I wanted to bring up. And I think also kind of on the city side of things, it would be helpful with like media being kind of scattered and no one really getting the same paper or anything. It might be helpful to kind of rethink how these things are broadcast to the public as well, because it's something that wasn't necessarily easy to find, especially with kind of the short notice. But anyway, just a suggestion not to deal with here, but, and that's really about it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up, I have Stacy Schultz.
Thought I had it down. Hello, my name is Stacy Schultz. I live at 805 West State Street here in Marshfield, Wisconsin. And this was brought to my attention. I wouldn't have known about this. I heard it from some neighbors. And I'm certainly more in favor of this being more in a business type setting versus in a residential setting. The one thing I wanted to speak on was that this person was notified in September that he didn't have the proper permit, if that's correct. And I'm wondering if he has been operating there since he was supposed to be waiting until today to do that. So I just want to bring that up to the group and just make sure that that was being followed. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bryce, can you comment on that? Did we lose Bryce? Oh, there he is.
I believe that the applicant did mention that he had been operating I didn't quite do the follow-up on that, but we can, yeah, I don't know if he's there or not. I would think that he might speak at some point, but you could maybe talk about that.
Okay, we'll put that one put that one aside for now. Next up, I have Chelsea Willis.
My name is Chelsea Willis. I live at 1215 West Blodgett Street in Marshfield. I just had, living fairly close to this area, concerns about maybe what the liability coverage would look for something like that, in terms of if something were to happen, or, I know it's not a lot of increased traffic, but other things that might cause some safety concerns, whether or not that would be something covered by like a typical homeowner's insurance, or whether it's something a little different than that. So that was my main core concern.
Okay, thank you. And then I have John Willis.
On? Yeah. All right. My name's John Willis. I live with her at 1215 West Blodgett. In Reno, we lived across the street from someone who did a home business, and we were on the main entry point for that neighborhood. And we had trucks and cars and trucks and cars and boxes and porch pirates and trucks and cars and boxes and porch pirates. And I am very reluctant to go through that experience again. That's my primary concern. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's the end of my sign-in sheet. Is there anyone else here that would like to address? I'll have you go to the podium.
I think I did, yeah. But you can press it.
Push the button. Hello. Hey.
You're going.
I'm Matthew Sampson. I'm at 608 North Schmidt Avenue. I've been in business since August 7th when I got my FFL. Bryce did not in email at any point say that I had to stop working. He just said, go through the process, pay the $300, and I will address the commission, let them know that I gave you the wrong permit. And so I have all the emails for that, and I don't think he'll say anything otherwise. So I did actually put back together a lever action weapon for a father and his son who took it apart, didn't know how to in the interim, and I sighted in an optic on a bolt action rifle yesterday morning at the range. So that's it. As far as your concerns go, I will address every one of them. I will look into area and the in-store. I'll see if I can change that. Unfortunately, Google doesn't allow me anything other than gun shop. So maybe his suggestion of an area instead of a physical address would help cure that. And he said he would also, he took my number, and if he figures out how to do it first, he'll call me and walk me through it. Your concerns, I have $1 million liability, and I have the policy here. And yours, I have like barely any traffic. I do have cameras all over my property. And if you want to come anytime and review the footage or look at my receipt books, you can to see that I have nothing. It's like two, 3 customers a week, a good week's 3. And transfers, if somebody buys something online and wants it shipped here, they would have to send it to me or Bullseye. And I would do the federal background check. If it's a pistol, there's also a state background. And then if they pass those, they can have. As far as shipping, there were some concerns about shipping. I have to be physically present with my ID, give my name, date of birth, and sign, and physically take it. If I'm not there, it's sent back. That's federal law, and the shipping providers know this. There's a special code on the package, and there's also like requirements of how it gets shipped. Now, currently, I have no volume of that. I think people just go buy their guns at Dunham's because they have really good prices and Fleet Farm, and I'm assuming Bullseye. I've never shopped there. What other concerns were there?
Can you inform us or educate us on the difference between a transfer and sale and how they're related and not the same?
I wouldn't say they're related because they're buying it from a whole nother company, and then they're picking somebody who has an FFL in their neighborhood, in their area, to receive it and then log it in with the ATF and then do the federal background check when they come in person. And so that's something, and that's one of 2. The other one is people who sell guns privately. There's no requirement for a background check for that. But sometimes sellers want to do a background check. So they could ask me to background check this person that wants to buy the gun from them. And then I can do that. And so I actually agree with that. I think you should push for that more because you don't know who you're selling, really.
Okay.
Any questions? Do you want any of this stuff? Licenses, insurance, et cetera.
I think we've seen the necessary documentation, I think.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Mary has a question. She was first.
How long, can you repeat how long you've been doing this?
So I started on August 7th when I received the FFL.
And from the estimation, you're getting 2 to 3 appointments a week in
At
there,
best.
right?
Yeah.
And so you've only been doing it this long. Do you anticipate growth? And if
No,
so,
because
what
my
kind of growth?
only means of reaching out is leaving business cards places or handing them out to people. And unfortunately, most of the people that I think would own guns and hand business cards to also know how to fix and service their own guns. So it's been very low volume.
I can hardly hear him.
Sorry, I'm normally a loud voice person, so I tend to try to tone it down.
So the answer is you don't foresee more than the 3 appointments?
No,
a
and if
week
it does
at this point?
actually grow, then I would need to go get a storefront. But my idea is in 1 to 2 years to buy some property outside of town and build a shop there. That's my future plan. But this was, I used my GI Bill to go through gunsmithing school spring through the summer and started up. I needed something to do. I've been a stay-at-home dad for 8 years, and my youngest over there just started school full-time. And so this is a hobby I had. It made sense. The government paid for it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions concerning the transfer. On a page, you have a page in which you advertise your transfer services.
Yes.
And so I understand you've explained the transfer service, but so I understand. So if Mr. Apple, fictitious name, buys a pistol, it's mailed to you, he comes to your house, and for a fee, you fill out the paperwork and you file it, and he leaves with the pistol. Is that how it works?
Not quite that simple. He's got to fill out the paperwork in front of me. I have to check it all. And then if it's a pistol revolver, I actually have to go through the state system, which is that other license I have. And they run a state background check and a federal NICS background check. I can only in this state do NICS checks on my own for long guns.
But the weapons that are the firearms that are coming to you are, do you receive NFA, what are called NFA firearms?
I don't have that license.
Oh,
My
I see.
license is for sales, service, and repair. It's gunsmith and sale.
Okay.
So I have the same license as Dunham's, Fleet Farm, Walmart, and what's the other one? Bullseye.
Okay.
There's 9 different federal firearms licenses, and one of them specifically is for NFA items.
So I saw on your ad the kinds of things you do in repairing the guns or the firearms, but you don't fabricate anything?
That is an FFL I do not have. If I did it, I think it's 20 years in federal prison per incident. So there's 9 federal firearms licenses, as confusing as it is. I have number 2. It costs $200. It is for sales, gunsmithing, and service.
Got it.
If I do any of those other FFL works, it's 20 years in prison.
So ammunition?
Can't make it.
Are there any of the processes involved other than selling oil, like that are involved chemicals?
I don't sell oil. I mean, I just use CLP off the shelf at the store.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, just standard gun cleaning oil.
All right. I have some questions for the administration too, but so they're not really questions for Ms.
Okay.
Matthews.
Does anyone else have any more questions for the applicant? Are you storing any ammunition on site besides your own use?
No.
No.
No. And my own use is very low, actually. I'm quite boring. I don't have a lot of firearms myself.
I'll have you come to the podium, actually, so that we capture your question.
Hi, Natasha Tompkins. I'm at 101 North Adams Avenue. This was just to follow up on you saying that you had a $1 million liability coverage. Is that a homeowner's insurance or is that a business insurance?
It is homeowners insurance because
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great to see that copy at some point. Maybe the city attorney could take it and then he could, if other people needed it, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll ask you to repeat what you just said on the mic so we capture that as well.
Just for the record, Andy, this clerk has the right place. Nobody in my office would hand me paperwork. So
Microphone.
USAA today confirmed that my $1 million liability covers my business, anything that goes on with it, comes from it. If I don't know that I would do this, but if I don't properly repair a firearm and it harms a person, and I say I don't know that it would happen because I'm obligated to go to the range and shoot it first myself. So if it happens to me, it would be more likely it's covered. And also, if there's a flood, all of the equipment is covered.
Okay. Anyone else have a question for the applicant in the room? Otherwise, I'll excuse him from the podium. Okay. I suppose we can, no, should we be taking? Oh, yes. Sure.
There was a public comment submitted in writing that will just be read into the record. So this public comment is from Catherine Savage, who resides at 1206 West Jefferson. I have handed a copy of it to all of the all of the commissioners, as well as the attachments that were printed out that were included in the email, just for your review. From Catherine, she says, "Dear members of the commission, I am unable to physically be present at this meeting as I was unable to manage a babysitter at only a few days' notice. I ask that you read this letter to the City Plan Commission meeting on Wednesday, October 25th. I am writing to express my concerns about the conditional use permit being considered at 608 North Schmidt. I urge the City Plan Commission to, at the very least, postpone a final decision pending adequate notification of those who it may impact and further discussion of potential impact on the neighborhood. I live with my husband and young children a block and a half from this property. This is a residential neighborhood with no sidewalks. North Schmidt is a very busy pedestrian route. In addition, this house is located near an uncontrolled intersection. Will traffic increase as this new business grows and more clients drive down North Schmidt trying to read house numbers? What impact might there be of visibility of this business? See attached screenshots of Google Maps on the surrounding residential property values, attractiveness to potential buyers. Based on Mr. Sampson's next door post online, see also attached, he is also doing FFL transfers with firearms being shipped to clients via his address. Are FFL transfers considered sales as they apply to a conditional use permit? In operating a business prior to having a proper permit, this seems is the case, see the attached Google business screenshot. Is this common city practice? I want to be sure that any business opening and operating in our neighborhood is doing so within the scope of the permit so that they will remain a residential neighborhood. I urge the City Plan Commission to table this application until more information is available. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Last chance to speak if you so wish.
I had a
Otherwise, we'll
question.
close the public hearing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we'll close the public hearing and hear Mr. Pyle's question.
Am I on? I had a question to administration, has there been any attempt, which kind of addresses what Ms. Sheffrel said, has there been any attempt to get neighborhood input, neighbors from the neighbors by the city?
No, the only input that the only notice that we gave was the public hearing notice, which was required. So that was sent to the newspaper to be posted twice, according to the statutes, and then to all neighbors within 200 feet of the property, which is one of the requirements in the zoning code. So anyone over the 200 feet were not notified, but it was also posted in the paper as well as the packet was available online. So generally before projects like this, we don't oftentimes set up, neighborhood notices or neighborhood meetings, but there have been times in the past where the Plan Commission may table an item to, do a neighborhood meeting, to do a neighborhood, whatever the Plan Commission feels would be necessary. So generally on the first meeting, we don't, or usually we don't go through that process unless specified by the Plan Commission.
I noticed that there is a park nearby, and that park is used by children. And is that park accessible, or does the person here who's written this concern speaks of foot traffic, not sidewalks? That's another issue, of course, but of traffic of children in the neighborhood going to the park. Has that been considered at all? And that means that there's children on the street near the, this business. No.
Well, no, it wasn't necessarily considered. It doesn't necessarily relate to, I guess, this business. However, yes, there probably are children or families that do walk to the park. However, as I mentioned, as the applicant mentioned, any of the transfers he would have to sign and go out and get it himself. So it's not like there's going to be any firearms left outside. So I guess in terms of any public safety, I wouldn't see that being an issue. And with only 1 to 3 vehicle trips per week from clients, that's a pretty minimal number. That's almost as comparable as a family that has teenage drivers where they have 3 or 4 people. It's not really that great of an increase. And in terms of the park, I don't quite know exactly the layout if there's sidewalks connecting, but it wasn't necessarily considered for this specific request.
Okay.
I would like to ask a question about this packet that was given to us. On the very last page where they're showing some firearm talk activity, the Matthew Sampson being shown on this document is not spelled the same as the Matthew Sampson on this screen. I would also venture to say it's not the same person by the picture.
Is this Mary?
Is it? Can I show him this, please?
It's spelled the same.
No, it's not. There's
T.
2 T's.
Extra T.
Oh, my apologies.
packet.
I was looking at the last name.
May I go show him?
We can come up. Oh.
Don't let me.
Maybe it's him, he just doesn't have his beard. She's saying this picture's not.
Did I ask
person.
him to go up to the microphone then?
Turn on my mic.
Okay.
I don't usually get involved in these things because I kind of let you do it unless I see some kind of illegal issue. But one of the problems is that I don't know what you showed him, but if we showed him something, he's going to comment on it. We probably need to at least have a record of what you showed him. Because we really are at that point sort of reopening this hearing because we're now taking information from the applicant and you folks are now going to be potentially considering that if you make a decision here. So is the item that you showed him part of the packet already?
Yeah.
No,
No.
no.
Oh, no, not part of the packet, no. It was sent by the concerned citizen.
Okay. So let's try to make sure that we just have a record of what was shown, and then he can make his comment if he chooses to do that. And frankly, I think this is the chair's call on whether you want to do that.
So I think it would be fine to make this part of the record and reopen the public hearing in essence. How would,
No, that's, so I think what you do is make sure you note what it is so that the clerk has a record of what you're talking about, whatever that document is, if it's described or whatever, so the clerk can mark it or keep track of it.
okay, so what Commissioner Bessler is referencing is a screenshot of something called activity, and it's some sort of social media site, it would appear to, and looks like a forum called Firearm Talk. Am I correct, Mary?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I guess proceed with your question.
I can see some concern that the community around you would have based off of some of the wording in regards to this. Again, though, it's the only part I wanted to question you on is why are you considering the federal checks a joke? That's the one I want to ask. It says that now the state check is only for pistols and revolvers. Long guns only require the federal check. But it's all a joke, though. The state check does nothing extra. Yeah, that's what I want to understand from that.
You'll agree with me.
Okay, could be.
So the state has this law where I have to submit to them for pistols and revolvers. They don't do anything other than the next check, but they charge the customer $10 to do the same thing that they allow me to do for long guns. And that's why I think it's a joke. Because it's like you're doing nothing different, and they do their check and they do the NICS check. And by law, if the NICS check comes back first, they have to approve theirs regardless if theirs is done or not. And then they charge the customer $10. And that's what I think the joke is. But if it's a long gun, I don't have to charge the customer $10. I can do the federal NICS check, and if they pass it, they can go home with it. So that's the joke, I think. And not like, ha ha, funny, like, arbitrarily.
Okay, I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
But I have no intent to not follow the law, whether or not I agree with it ever. We all follow those every day, even traffic laws.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions for the applicant? Otherwise, I'll reclose the public hearing. Okay, I'll reclose that public hearing. City Clerk, you wanted to mention something about one of Mr. Pyle's
Oh,
questions.
I was only going to answer Mr. Pyle's question that it was published in the Marshfield News Herald October 11th and October 18th were the 2 dates of publication. And the letter for premise within 200 feet went to 22 property owners.
The letter went to 22 property owners?
Correct. 22 property owners were within the 200-foot radius of his property.
Okay, at this point, I think we'll entertain a motion. Mr. O'Reilly, is there a second?
Yeah. I'll make a motion to approve. I think he's done well with trying to follow in the rules. The background is there for him to do everything, and I don't think we can treat this differently than any other business. As mentioned earlier by Brace, personal feelings can't get involved in no matter what this is. If you're following the guidelines set forth by the law, it appears to me that he's met all that and answered a lot of additional questions. I don't see a risk involved with it. I don't see people walking by being an issue. I mean, Bullseye has people in their parking lots driving by, walking by. I don't think there's going to be a huge increase to the traffic in the neighborhood. So I guess, in my opinion, it should be approved, and that's the motion I would make.
I would second that
Second
motion.
from Bessler. Okay.
I would also like to make a comment too, if I could.
Yeah, discussion.
Well, that the operating his business beforehand was admittedly a city of Marshfield's fault, not his. And so I do think we need to make that clear. So yes, I second that motion.
Okay, further discussion.
I agree with O'Reilly and Mrs. Besler said, so yeah, I'm basically for it.
Okay, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
We'll do a roll call vote at this point.
Sure. Mr. Piles?
No.
Mr. Frederick?
Yes.
Ms. Besler?
Yes.
Ms. Veith?
Yes.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Yes.
And Mr. Caprillion?
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Moving on. Item number 10, rezoning request by Jeff Hill of Gene Hill Construction to rezone the subject property parcel 33-06798 from CMU to MR12 multifamily residential. The property is located approximately 171 feet to the west from North Adams Avenue and to the north of Fleet Farm. Presenter is Bryce Hembrook, planner.
Thank you. So the applicant is proposing to add, would like to eventually add duplexes and townhouses to the subject property. Currently, the property is zoned community mixed use, CMU, which allows for a wide variety of commercial uses as well as some residential uses like apartments as a conditional use. But right now, the CMU district is kind of the most general commercial and office use district. And he is looking to propose to rezone that to MR12 multifamily residential. So right now, the current zoning district, the CMU district, does allow for townhouses in that district. However, duplexes would not be permitted. Thus, that's why he's going for this request. The other thing I did want to just mention is there is currently a right-of-way for the cul-de-sac, or dedicated for a future cul-de-sac, that may be shortened in the future as part of the plans. So this request would also include any part of the land that would be basically absorbed in that cul-de-sac. Right now, just the right way, there's not actually a cul-de-sac, but it was dedicated as of right now. So the property is located to the north of Fleet Farm, to the east of a construction company, to the south of an assisted living facility, and then to the west of single-family homes as well as family residential. So it's kind of in a transitional area, and it is also identified as transitional mixed use in the future land use map. So the transitional mixed use area is generally located for properties that are along key corridors, such as McMillan Street in this case. And this has the opportunity to be a commercial area or a residential area that's more of a medium to high density residential. So really this area is kind of designed to kind of take a close look at where the specific property is, what are the surrounding land uses, and determine if MR12 is the correct zoning district in this case. So by rezoning to MR12, they would be able to have a number of land uses that would be permitted by right, which would include single family, 2-flat, twin house, duplex, and townhouse and apartments, 3 to 4 units by right. And then townhouse, 5 to 8 units by conditional use, as well as apartments, 5 to 12 units by conditional use. Right now in the CMU district, any residential uses go by the standards in the MR12 district. So ultimately they're about the same when it comes to residential uses, the same requirements. The only difference would be that by rezoning this to MR12, you would be able to have the duplexes, but also you would eliminate the ability to have to allow for commercial uses. So just for kind of an extreme example, right now, a drive-through restaurant could technically go in there, and if they meet all the zoning requirements, it would be permitted by right, and the Plan Commission wouldn't be able to review anything, the neighbors will be notified, et cetera. So right now, just kind of looking at the property, it doesn't seem like CMU is really the best fit for this specific property. The subject property is approximately 5.6 acres as currently designed today. As I mentioned, the right-of-way for the cul-de-sac may be shortened, so the acreage would actually be increased slightly. So the applicant did provide a site plan for what he's looking at as a conceptual plan. And I do want to reiterate that the request that we're talking about tonight is the rezoning request. And we're focusing on what district should this property be zoned. I'm only showing this as just a high-level concept. This plan could change. Plans could fall through and something else comes up. So any discussion that we have should be, related to the zoning itself and not necessarily the site layout. But I also included some of the elevations and floor plans of what he's looking to potentially put there. The one thing I do want to also highlight is that these plans and those elevations would be reviewed by the Plan Commission through a group development review. So a group development requires a conditional use permit. So you guys would be able to take a look at the site plan, decide if this is, something that you guys are interested in allowing. So just to kind of show you what that could look like. But with that, I've looked at the density of that current conceptual plan. And the density would be approximately 8 units per acre, which would be considered a desired density in the MR12 district. Ultimately, the MR12 district is looking for densities of up to 12 units per acre. So 8 would be, like I said, in a good spot. The conceptual plan as of right now shows about 10 townhouse buildings with 3 units each and 7 duplexes. And so one of the other things that we do when we consider rezoning requests is to take the density of the neighborhood in. So there's not a whole lot of residential to the west or south, obviously with the commercial properties, but included the 4 residential properties to the east along Adams, and that density would actually be 5.8 units per acre. So kind of in a good spot for a medium density residential area. I kind of mentioned in my staff report that this property essentially kind of serves as a transition and buffer area between the commercial area to the west and the south, to the residential to the east, especially to the neighborhoods to the east of Adams as well. And ultimately, I kind of also further discussed how I don't necessarily think the CMU district is the best zoning district, I guess, for this specific property due to the amount of uses that would be technically permitted by right. Obviously, there would have to be some infrastructure added, but MR12 seems to be a more appropriate zoning district. And this would also allow for more housing. Obviously, one of the main things that we have been talking about for the last couple of years is the need for more housing, the need for different types of housing options, townhouses, duplexes, single family, starter homes, luxury homes. Marshfield is currently in need of, all types of housing. So this would be one way to take advantage of a vacant property that could easily connect to existing infrastructure from North Adams to create some living opportunities for housing. With that, my recommendation would be to approve the rezoning request by Jeffrey Hill to rezone the subject properties from CMU, community mixed use, to MR12, multifamily residential, and direct staff to prepare an ordinance for common council consideration.
Okay, thank you, Bryce. This item does require a public hearing. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to address the Plan Commission? Please state your name and address.
Mitch Schindler. I'm one of 3 owners of Merwood Construction, 2025 West Veterans Parkway. We would be the neighbor to the west. We are extremely concerned about this rezoning from the standpoint of we are self-admittedly not a great residential neighbor. We've been at that property for 40 plus years, and we've grown and operated our business as we have for those 40 plus years. Zoning, conditional uses have all changed over those years, and we've grown with that. Our hours are not officially within the CMU district currently. We operate more as an industrial type neighbor, and the buffer between us and a residential neighborhood should strongly be considered. If this is to be approved, we would need some reassurance that conditional use for us and operating hours would get changed, or maybe our zoning were to get changed to an industrial, so we don't have to worry about operating hours. We have deliveries all day long. We operate a fabricating shop out of this business that makes noise, mechanic shop. My guys typically are there at 5:30 in the morning, and it's the first thing is the trucks get backed out with backup alarms. And I'm strongly concerned that if it's 40 or 50 new neighbors are going to put the livelihood of the 85 employees at Merwood in danger, just because of hours, operations. So in the event this were to go forward, we need some reassurance that we can operate business as we have for the last 40 years and continue to grow as we have in the city. So we've strongly expanded our excavation, heavy equipment line, and those are all things that leave that yard, as well as deliveries. I guess my main question is, or comment is that it feels like there's no MR12 around this area. It feels like it's kind of a spot zoning scenario. I understand the need for housing in the city. I just strongly encourage you guys to reconsider whether this is the appropriate spot for it next to us. If these apartments, triplexes, duplexes, whatever exist as they were today, and Merwood did not, I would ask that, if we were to, and our lot was zoned as MR12 and we wanted to go switch to CMU, would that be considered? So I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the commission?
Could we see where your business is on this map? The man who just spoke, gentlemen?
It's the
Directly to the west.
all the the pink there.
Could that just be pointed out to us?
It's the
Yeah, so it's going to be.
Well, just describe it. The purple.
just look to the left of the purple.
The CMU
Okay.
Yeah.
to the left,
Okay,
and also the CMU to the northwest.
okay.
Those two.
So the purple part is the part that's being considered, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and so you're just to the left of that, these various buildings and so on and up there. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to know.
Is this on? All right. My name is Ryan Kidder. I own the properties at 1500 and 1502 North Adams, which are directly to the east of this area. And I adjoin what'll be the road the road getting to this property would be directly to the north of my property. So I've got just a couple questions. One is, if a road goes in, who pays for it? I don't understand how that works. I know when Adams was redone here last year, all the owners were assessed, and I paid a pretty hefty bill for that. So if you can, I assume somebody might know the answer to that. If I could get a answer to that. And second, just a question when the gentleman was talking before. I think you said his name was Bryce. He's online. He was commenting about the density per unit proposed. He was cutting out a little bit, and then there was a lot of noise out in the hallway. So if he could repeat what was said there, I would appreciate that, because it sounded like the density per acre, per whatever it is that you compute would be significantly higher than recommended. And not that I'm concerned with it, I just want to understand what that is. So those two requests, if you can comment on both those. Thank you.
Bryce, if you can comment on his questions.
Yeah, so I'll comment on the density first. As the concept plan is currently proposed, it would be about 8 units per acre. And as I mentioned, in the MR12 district, up to 12 dwelling units per acre is generally the intended density in that district. And then if you were to include the speaker's property as well as the other 3, that would be reduced to under about 6 units per acre. So it's about right in the middle of what we would technically consider a medium density residential in the city. And then in terms of the question about the road, and I can't see, but is Tom Turkey in attendance at all?
Yes, this is in the boundary of the new TIF that we just created on the north west corner of the city of Marshfield. The intent was that the infrastructure needed to develop this parcel, which has been basically difficult to do in the past, would be funded by the TIF. The recommendation would be to the Board of Public Works that there would be no assessments with that. But until that recommendation and that approval has been passed through, that's where we stand with it. The street and water main would come in from Adams Avenue, and the sanitary and storm sewer would have to come in through the Fleet Farm parcel through off of Veterans Parkway. We've already spoken to Fleet Farm, and they've given us a verbal for an easement across their parcel for the development of this property.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comments from the? Yeah.
I just get some clarity on that. What I interpret that was that there is potential funding for this, but it's not necessarily earmarked. It has to be approved. Is that correct?
So when we do projects for the city of Marshfield, when we have a funding source, the funding source is we have a TIF district that we created, but until the actual project is identified and enumerated in that TIF, we can't do really anything with it. And it's really not a project till all the developers agreements and all the pieces are in place. So there's a lot of process that's involved before this, but the TIF helps the city fund a street opening project, whereas in other projects like this, we may see a developer having to fund the street opening and everything else that goes with it. Our intent would be that this would be a curb and gutter street and with a mountable curb and gutter section, and there would be no ditches on this section of Bradford Court.
Just for clarity then, it's your intent then that the TIF would be used for this, and then the property owners would not be assessed for cost for that road or any other infrastructure to get back to this area.
Again, that it would be my recommendation, but that has to go through the council. The council actually has to approve that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the public?
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
My name is James Eagle, 1508 North Adams Avenue. I'm the property owner on the north side of the proposed cul-de-sac. Ryan is the property owner on the south side. We each have 171 feet property across that line. My question is, if this zoning is approved and the TIF doesn't go through and you decide to put that road in there, then would we as property owners be assessed? As long as the TIF comes in and pays for that, it makes a big difference to us as property owners. 171 feet, putting curb and gutter and sewer in there is going to be a big expense to us at no benefit to us. That's my concern. Now, if it goes to TIF and it gets paid for like it did on the Daniels subdivision, which those property owners paid nothing for curb and gutter, I don't have an issue with it. I am surprised at the density. I was under the impression it wouldn't be that many. So in that 5.6 acres, from what I'm hearing, you're talking 40 to 45, maybe even 50 units. Well, then comes a traffic situation because there's only one in and out. That's kind of caught me by surprise tonight because I didn't think the density was going to be near that high. Thank you.
Either Tom or Bryce, can you address this question about the whether the road would ever be put in absent the TIF being approved and implemented?
With any street project, there's always the possibility that the road could be ordered in by the Common Council with a project that wasn't funded by TIF, but there is a TIF that actually was created for kind of this purpose. So there is a proposed funding source, and that's what the discussions have been up to this point.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to address the commission from the public? Yes.
I'm Jeff Hill. I'm the one proposing this zoning change. To answer your question, Jim, the density of that is likely going to max at 37. It's turning out that it's going to be probably between 30 and 35 units total. It would never hit 45 or 50. There's just not enough space to make that happen. Total units. Yeah. And the guys from Marwood that spoke, they did give you a courtesy call earlier this week and asked me to come out and talk to them about this. So I went and visited them yesterday and they told me their concerns. We walked that back property line that adjoins where their business is. And I am sensitive to their concerns. I really am. As a contractor, I can understand that these guys get started early and they do move around and there is some noise. That being said, I asked if it was okay if I could go out there this morning at 5:30 and admittedly might not have been their busiest day because of the weather. I saw all the dump trucks had been started at 5:30 and were running and warming up and getting ready to go. And back on that property, I couldn't hear any of that. I heard the one truck back out of the closest property to this. I heard the beeping noise. With the window of my vehicle down, with the window of it up, I heard it, but I don't know that it would have bothered me if I were in one of the few homes along that side. And to be honest with you, I think the only concern that I would have if I were them are the few properties along that west side, which could be between 2 and 6, depending on how. There's a lot of work to be done with this yet. Obviously, if it doesn't get rezoned, it's probably a dead issue. I don't own the property yet. Fleet Farm has been gracious enough to let me do some of this preliminary work, like the rezone and, or get the rezone started, I should say, as well as the easement that would maybe be needed to get to Veterans Parkway with the stormwater and sewer. So they've indicated to me that there's no other purpose for this land in their eyes other than residential. They wouldn't sell it for anything other than this, and I had to sign off on that very thing. So if it's not going to be residential, it's just going to be a permanent buffer zone for Marwood to the rest of the residential properties. My intent for this is elderly couples that want to maybe downsize their homes, and maybe a young couple that doesn't quite want to spend $500,000 to build a different house with me. So I don't see this as a big high traffic family area at all. All the units are 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom units. I'm happy to answer any other questions anybody might have, but that's my answers to those few issues.
Well, we have the applicant up here. Is anybody?
Mr. Chairman, do you envision any kind of buffer zone on the property between this and the commercial property?
Well, I had recommended to them that maybe a fence would be an appropriate
I mean, any kind of sound buffering?
Yeah, maybe a sound fence would be an appropriate solution to that. I haven't looked into that. This is an issue that came up to me 2 days ago from these guys. And I have absolutely no problem with them guys voicing their concerns at all. I am sensitive to that issue that they may have.
And if I could just chime in response to that, as part of the group development review, buffer yards could be, you know, if there's any requirements that you guys want to add for landscaping, fencing, whether that's along the west, whether that's along the east, that those types of details can be addressed during the group development process.
I don't have a question for him, but I do have a question for Mara Wood.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Have you had any complaints to date from any of the surrounding property owners at this point in time?
At this point, no. You know, Fleet Farm's been our neighbor for years. These residents have been our neighbors for years. The only real new neighbor has been Stony River or Ridge, whatever, to the northeast, the elderly housing. That being said, it's a little further removed and we don't have doors open directly at them too. So, you know, and I guess just if I can add, you know, Bryce, do you have any idea like why this was zoned CMU to start with? And, you know, why wasn't it a different rezoning from the start? So.
Thank you.
I have a question too for you, sir. Is it okay now?
Yeah, go ahead.
You expressed concern about, seemed like about the, you know, existence of your business. You know, that you might lose the business over this. How would that play out?
Our biggest concern is primarily the noise and operating hours because we're not a 9 to 5 business. And in the CMU, I think we're supposed to be 7 to 9. So we're more of an early morning riser group. So my biggest concern is if there's 40 new neighbors or 30, one of them's going to have a problem with us opening our doors at 5:30 and backing trucks out the door. And at this point, based upon code and regulations, we probably got no other means other than to abide by that, unless we were to get a conditional use permit for operating hours or change our zoning to an industrial type setting.
Is that, can I ask the planners, is that a concern that somehow there would be, I'm not sure how that would work, that his business would be jeopardized?
No, I mean, as of right now, you know, they're supposed to be operating within the noise regulations and the operating hours. I don't recall anything specifically mentioned for the CMU district in the zoning code. Now, in the part of the municipal code where they discuss noise, I don't know if there's anything more specific, but I don't necessarily know all the requirements for that within the zoning code. I know. Did you say 7 in the morning?
Say that again, Bryce.
Mitch, did you say 7 a.m. was the time?
Yeah, I believe it's 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. for CMU.
Okay. So in terms of, you know, how this would affect it, it wouldn't really affect them because they should be, you know, meeting those regulations. Regardless, we can't go back and place any additional conditions on them just because other people complain. Now, if Mayor Wood decided to expand in the future and they need a conditional use permit, you know, there's no saying that there might not be additional conditions in the future, but that would be more for a specific project that would come up at a different time. We wouldn't necessarily go back and say, oh, you know, I guess as long as they're meeting the noise regulations, there's not much that we can do.
So residents moving in would not be able to file complaints against them?
They can still file complaints and we would still look into them, but it would be a matter of, you know, whether or not they're meeting those requirements. And unfortunately, I don't know those requirements at the top of my head.
Yeah, do you feel like you're in compliance now? You had assurance of that?
So I believe CMU is one of the few zoning districts that has the noise ordinance, Bryce. And I'm quite certain it's 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And currently, I would say no, we're not. We haven't for 35 years, honestly. So,
In other words, okay, I understand.
and I've gotten involved halfway through those 35 years. So when the rules have all changed and all those kinds of things, I can't say. All I can tell you is that we've been operating, expanding there for that many years, and you know, business has been good. We're happy to be a part of Marshfield, happy to be here. Just strongly concerned that a phone call is going to make us start opening our doors at 7 a.m. instead of 5:30.
My name's Scott. I'm Mitch's business partner. I think the part that's maybe missing here is the new zoning restrictions were not in existence when Merritt was developed. The CMU code was developed since then. A time restraint was put in place. Merritt's been operating at the hours it has been for 40 plus years. No complaints have been filed, so nobody's required us to operate within those rules. Had they, we'd applied for a conditional use permit allowing us to operate outside of those hours. Probably would have been granted that because we don't have residential neighbors essentially being affected by it. But the reality is we've been there longer than this rule's been in place. And now we are looking at the potential of a complaint from a new neighbor requiring us to conform to a rule that we have not been previously required to conform to. So that's our biggest concern.
I'm not seeing anything specific on the CMU with noise hours of operation. I do believe that it is in another part of the code.
I didn't understand that at all.
Yeah. While you're looking for that, Bryce, we do have another comment from the public.
Yeah, I have one more question I forgot to ask. Are these going to all be rental units, or are some going to be sold, or a mixture of them, or what?
Yeah, Jeff, I'll have you come to the podium to answer that.
My intent is to sell them. That being said, the idea here is for the rezone. I've got so much work to do beyond this point. I'm hesitant to start investing too much money into I've already spent money with the plans, and I've got to take one step at a time here, but the general idea is laid out there. I would like to sell most of them as possible. The whole genesis of this was trying to find a small place maybe for my parents to move out of their existing home into something nice and smaller. You know, maybe I would keep one or two as rentals for myself, but no, the idea is to sell these properties.
Thank you. Mr. Riley?
Thank you again. From what I'm hearing right now, it seems logical to me to approve it as is. It sounds like the details can be worked out. If it is a sound wall, if it is some type of decision made through the approval of the actual layout, common sense to me would tell me that you guys would have to be granted a variance. I mean, you're not going to take a established business that does as much work as you guys do and get you kicked off property, or try to force hours that the construction industry does not work. It's just not logical. So I can't guarantee that, but I would sure hope there would be enough common sense through that process to make the decision to allow you to operate as you do.
Can I just respond to that, Mike? I would have no problem with that said variance either. I mean, as the person in charge and in control of this, you know, I would try to redesign this maybe so it would minimize the number of units up against that west side. And furthermore, I would bring that to the attention of the potential buyers that, hey, we've got a business back here. You know, there are going to be issues with noise from, and they told me yesterday, even it probably isn't a big deal after 8 a.m. when the guys are all gone, but those hours from 5:30 to 8, yeah, you may hear a reverse beeper or something like that. So that wouldn't destroy my thoughts of this project for sure.
And I think some of that sound buffer could be created just with some evergreens or You know, use some porous type material that'll absorb that sound. I think it's reasonable. It doesn't sound like it's extremely belligerent sounds, and I know some weather helps it carry more, but I can't help but think that you can work through those details through the process.
Then I would ask that that's a part of your guys' a motion tonight, that conditional use permit is considered as a part of a requirement to move forward in the rezoning. Because without out assurance, I hate to say it, but you can throw reality out the window. Perception is all you need these days to pick up the phone and file a complaint, and the police department's required to report and act on it. And if that happens every day, I don't think you can just leave it to the wind for that to become reality. So
I agree. Could you please comment on how that could unfold legally? I mean, we could add that comment in there, but we don't even know what the development is going to look like at this point. I don't know if we can put specifics in at this point or just a comment. I don't know if that's the appropriate time to do it.
Well, okay, so first of all, you got to consider what you're doing. You're really looking at a zoning change and a recommendation related to that. The issue that's been raised is obviously a consideration, something they came here seriously to present. The problem is, at least from what I understand, is that they may not be in compliance now. That's one of the things that I struggle with, is that what you're talking about is essentially a business coming in and saying, there's these rules, no one really has enforced them against us because nobody's really there to do that. And so if you put this development in, which obviously the city wants to use the best use of its property, so you want development, certainly understandable why they have that concern. Planning for it becomes another issue. Do you start going down that path? This is a one-off situation, but if you do that here, do you start looking at, we're gonna put on requirements that somebody might not have to comply with the certain elements of the code? Because at least from what Bryce said, and I haven't looked at this specifically in terms of the noise issue and where that falls within the zoning code, but my suspicion is that it's not actually in the zoning code, it's in another provision in the code. And so you're talking about whether or not we enforce that. That's one reason why they're also legitimately, they're telling you that, well, your promise that, oh, we were gonna be real common sense about that in the future means really nothing as you sit here today. The only thing I can think of is you have the ability to put a restriction on a conditional use permit. So one of the considerations could be for you to make the recommendation that a sound barrier of some kind be considered as part of this conditional use permit. Beyond that, I don't think you've got a good way of doing that. You certainly can't commit to Marwood, for example, getting a conditional use in the future because this particular conditional use has been being put in. And the reason for that is that there's specific requirements you folks need to meet in order to grant a conditional use permit. So you can't do one in advance without a permit or without an application being in front of you. So you can't tell them that as part of this, we're going to grant you a conditional use permit in anticipation that you might have a noise complaint in the future. So that's one problem. The other problem you have is you can't talk to the enforcement of the code elsewhere because this body doesn't really have the authority to do that. So you can't forgive a noise violation that might take place in the future, even though as you're sitting here and you're making this decision that may very well affect their business, that doesn't give you the ability to waive some provision in the zoning code that will probably be enforced by another body and or officer, ordinance officer or such. So that's the only thing I can think of. I think I also interpret, and I'll rely on Bryce to the extent that he wants to comment on this, but I think what he was saying is that when it comes to the noise barrier or a consideration of that, that could be part of the development project and requirements of the development itself rather than as part of the conditional use permit. And I just say conditional use permit, is this a condition? This is a zoning change. And so that's one other thing I want to say is that when you make a zoning change, all right, you have all this discussion that's going on here about the details. What's going to go in, what we think is going in, and all of that. And I'll caution you, I don't want to scare you, but we need to be practical about this. And that is that when what you're taking is the information in front of you, the recommendation of staff, in this case, Bryce, and you're making that decision to change the zoning. You're not deciding specifically what's going in there. You're not deciding exactly how that's going to happen. You're not making those restrictions. So when I was talking about a wall, you don't actually have the authority. You're deciding whether this zoning is changing only. And it doesn't mean when you make that decision, because even as this sits here, as I understand the scenario, this property isn't even owned by the entity before you speaking here today. So if you make the zoning change and the zoning changes, that doesn't mean that Mr. Hill's project's going in there. It means that you've changed the zoning, and whatever that zoning, whatever those restrictions, whatever the provisions are, broader, narrower, whatever, that's what now applies to that property.
I'd like to. Yeah, and I would like to just touch on a couple things. I did find the noise ordinance, which would be in chapter 10 under public peace and good order. It does talk about the maximum permissible sound levels. So in between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., there's a 65 decibel level maximum requirement. And then from 7 a.m. until 10 p.m., there's an 80 decibel requirement or maximum requirement. So it is not located in the zoning code. That's generally something that's throughout the city and not necessarily just CMU. And then I do want to touch on, correct, I want to agree with Attorney Wolfgram's interpretation that this is, strictly for the rezoning of the zoning district of the property, and that the buffer yards or any type of sound barrier on the west side, that would be discussed and could potentially be a condition listed under the group development review, which would, be through the CUP process. So I would definitely not recommend adding a condition to this specific use, but that would be something to consider as we move forward. And as the city attorney also mentioned, this is just for the zoning district of the site. We saw the site plan, we saw, the renderings, but once it's rezoned MR12 and, a new project could come up or, maybe a different developer looks at it, it could be different than what was presented before. So I included that just to kind of give you an idea of what was currently proposed, and as the applicant has mentioned, it's kind of being, dialed down a little bit more from what I showed. So just keep in mind that, what you approved tonight is just the zoning and whether or not it's appropriate in that instance.
And just to iterate what Mitch had said earlier, I think the map up here is kind of misleading. If that map were to be presenting what is there today, the pink area and what is shown as purple is currently pink. And if we as Merriwood Construction were showing up and requesting that area that is currently pink be rezoned in purple so that we could function amongst like-minded zoning areas, I would ask, would you guys consider that to be an acceptable rezoning? Because that's essentially what's being asked. It is currently the same zoning as we are with the same purpose. And the request is to change the zoning to something completely different within the same area. So.
Bryce, can you reiterate what you said about the noise restrictions? And did you say? Go ahead.
So there is a maximum permissible sound level for between 7 p.m. until 10 p.m. That decibel level would be 80, and then between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. it would be 65. And so that's something that kind of covers, almost all of the city. There are some exemptions such as, emergency equipment, snow blowers, when they're not on a commercial basis, some lawnmowers, etc. So that is under our chapter 10 public peace and good order.
So that's universal regardless of zoning.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay.
As far as I understand it, correct.
Okay. And another question. So under CMU, residential property is already allowed, like residential construction could already happen as it's zoned today. Yes? There'd be nothing to stop that.
It would be considered a conditional use in the CMU currently.
Yeah.
But yes, it could be allowed.
Okay.
But it would require going before the planning commission.
Yeah. I see. Okay, any other questions during the public hearing?
Yeah, I have one more question, Brace. Is there any deviations or exceptions to the sound ordinance given for industrial type facilities, or is this just a citywide standard?
Let me address that because I think Bryce had to kind of hunt this down. I've prosecuted this. Okay, so it is something that applies universally in the city. It is one where typically it only comes up in the context of a noise complaint or somebody's next door. We've dealt with these issues multiple times over the course of the city. One example that I can recall, everything seems like it's recent past, but it's probably been 10, 15 years. But I'm thinking of a couple of car washes where the horn, or the air that drives off the cars has got a pretty large volume sound and frankly violated the city code. And what ended up happening is that there had to be modifications to that process in order to meet the requirements. Now, it would always be there, all right? Meaning that sound is gonna probably be a violation of the city code. You don't end up with someone even checking on it until you get a complaint, somebody, that happens to live by or whatever, or you have a change. This happens frequently. You have a change in resident. One resident is not bothered by it. Another resident moves in and they make a complaint. And frankly, it's in the code. If an officer goes down there and measures that sound, they're likely going to have it. And I will tell you that one of the ones that we've dealt with within the last few years anyway, were literally the complaints about church bells. And certain church bells, because of the timing, actually were in violation of the code. And now you went back, when you talk about something being in place for a long period of time, those church bells were there long before we even had, noise ordinances. We're probably still shooting guns in the city at that point. But that is the practicality that some of those regulations are there. But it does apply universally, and there are limited exceptions to some specific project. Now, what I would say is that if law enforcement went down on a noise complaint and it was because somebody's drilling and they're finishing off a deck or a porch or something like that, chances are there's not going to be a citation issued. It's a one-off. They're not going to do that. When it's something that it's, again, in the situation where we dealt with the dryer noise at the car wash, that was an ongoing everyday item that was required to be brought into compliance.
I think at this point, we'll entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to approve
Is there a second?
the ordinance change.
The zoning?
Because they're the zoning change. Sorry, I did not mean that wording. Zoning change, because I'm going to go back to what Attorney Wolfgram said. That's what we're here for. Not for the whole entire project or solving the world's problems on the sound at this point in time, but should be addressed later.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Discussion? Mr. O'Reilly?
I think I am going to agree with the motion and the second. I think with the mindset we're using, the area becomes undevelopable if we don't do it. So I think in the future, whatever plans are there, the issues can be addressed at that point. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Piles?
Well, I am thinking that the company is I've not been out there, but to that, and listened to that, but it seems to be in some state of non-compliance as we're here, even though there hasn't been a complaint. Problem is, you could get a complaint anytime from anybody, as I understand it, right? So the percentage of possibility of complaint certainly would rise with this development. Yeah, I would like there to be some way for the planning commission to make this company whole. This is an important company to the community. I'm a little bit torn, but I understand that we don't have, that the issue before us is a very narrow, as our attorney has pointed out, a very narrow call. So I'm wondering, can we also send a letter or a memorandum of our concerns to City Council? Is this commission allowed? Can this commission do that? Can we send a letter or a memorandum of our concerns to City Council? Why not? Sure we can.
Yeah, I mean, so, I mean, that's part of this process. So there's no reason that you can't make a record of that. That would be even potentially part of your minutes.
It's in the minutes for sure.
Yeah. But if you want to do something specific, that can happen. I'll caution you if you're talking about sending a letter. This gets back to what I had said before we started this meeting. If you ever look at doing that, and you want to have something like that done, what this body needs to consider is that no one representative has any authority to do anything, not even the chair. So what the body should do, if you chose, hey, we want to do a letter, select one of your members, authorize them to write the letter, and you can do it that way, or you have them write a letter and it gets approved. You got to be careful because you can't approve anything without having an open meeting that's noticed. But the idea is you want to be formal about that, so there's a record that it was approved by the entire body.
So we could put how do you say you can put something in the minutes and not be a letter?
Because it was
in there.
discussed.
We've been discussing it.
Yeah, it was discussed.
Yeah, but it's not in the minutes that there's, it's not in the minutes that there's some kind of consensus.
So one way that you could do that is you could move right now to say we would like that the minutes specifically reference that this body has considered X, Y, and Z, and that to be included in the minutes.
All right.
And that will be reviewed through consent agenda in the council, so it will be brought up.
Of which you are a member, of course, so you could.
That's my understanding is that's why we have a city council representative on the planning commission and others.
Yeah. But I think that this company is looking for a little bit more than just, well, we have, good feelings. So I would like to make an amendment to the motion. Okay?
And that amendment would be?
That amendment would be that okay, I'm losing your wording, but the amendment would be that we insert into the minutes, this may need to be modified. This motion may need to be somewhat massaged, but that we as a body insert into the minutes our concerns that we would like to see a sound barrier, that if there is a approval down the line, that we would like to see a sound barrier. And we'd also like to consider the city council or the planning commission, to consider a variance for this company. That was a conditional use variance, is that it? I'm not sure. How does that work? Sorry, I don't have all this here, but I'm trying to wing it a little bit. Maybe the attorney
I'm working
acting for us can help me.
I'm working on at least something that I think outlines at least the first part of that. I caution you to be getting down the path of creating some kind of reference to a conditional use for that business in the future. First of all, you don't have a complaint in front of you. You don't have an application for conditional use, so we don't know what it looks like. It's very hard to address that.
All right.
There's a procedure for that to come in place if in fact does. The other problem is you're talking about a conditional use because this body is used to, obviously, dealing with zoning issues. And remember, what we found out now today as we talked about this ordinance regarding noise, that is not a zoning ordinance. That is a different type of ordinance, and so there may not be a conditional use that would apply to that noise ordinance.
Okay.
So here's what I'm thinking, and you can just, again, somebody's got to make this motion. I am not a policy guy. I only do these things when I'm asked. My will, my interest, my whatever has no purpose unless I'm asked.
I understand your disclaimers.
Correct. I have no opinion unless you specifically ask for an illegal contract. So you could put in here, though, that this body finds that in the event of any future development, that a consideration be made that a noise barrier be placed to protect the current standards of practice used by Merriwood Construction.
All right, so that's my amendment. That be placed in the, that those words be placed in the minutes. And then my amendment is in addition to the motion that was made. Okay? So it's an addition to it.
So that was a amendment. So what has to be voted on is the amendment.
Yep.
So then, okay.
You have to, I don't have a second yet.
Second from Mr. O'Reilly. All right. We'll do a voice vote on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now back to the original motion. I have
original motion.
I have a question.
As amended.
Yeah, as amended. Can we place conditions upon the rezoning approval or denial? So if we were to say, well, we approve the rezoning on the condition that the applicant ends up purchasing the land, or on the condition that with any future development, there is a sound barrier placed. Can we do anything like that?
Hoping that we can have Bryce chime in on that first.
Okay.
Yeah, so I almost always recommend to steer clear of conditions on zoning. In Wisconsin, there's some talk about, conditional rezoning, contractual zoning, which would be something that App would probably be better suited to kind of explain. But I usually recommend against it because it adds some complexity to it. I do know of some municipalities in the Milwaukee area that do add complexity. But generally, when these are approved, the city would, approve an ordinance that would change the legal designation of the site. And generally, us as, planners or city staff, we don't think to look at there's hardly any conditions that are included with the rezoning. So it's not really something that we would think to look into our files. Let's say 20 years ago from now on, there's still no development, and there's a conditional zone, but a lot of times we wouldn't really catch that as staff, just because it's not something that's common. And I would generally recommend against it. I think there are some situations where we have in the past at some sort of time limit of if the property owner didn't acquire, if the potential property owner was working on buying the property, and if that fell through by let's say December 31st, 2023, this ordinance would become null and void. We have done that once. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it is something that's been considered. And I don't know if Pat, if you have anything else to add on that.
Well, see, I tried to pass the buck off. What the heck? I don't know. So truly, that it would be the recommendation. You don't start putting requirements on that. For one, you start affecting that property and its ability to be transferred. There is also the question of legality in defining that. So I think the best practice is not to getting into putting restrictions and making that conditional. One of the references that Bryce identified was what's deemed contractual zoning, which is we're going to give this to you, but you're going to give something back to us. And so we're putting a requirement, but by putting that condition on, it is contractual that we're going to give you your zoning change, but we're putting this restriction on. And the problem with that then also is that decisions made by this body in regard to zoning changes, and then ultimately the council in terms of passing a zoning ordinance, for example, is that you are held by a legal standard. And so when you do that, what's that standard? Because if the person making that request then wants to challenge it, they don't challenge the whole thing, they're challenging only that restriction. And then what was your reason for doing it? And is there evidentiary support to support that? And were they given an opportunity fully for due process on that one particular restriction? Okay. I mean, and keep in mind, you've heard, I'm just going to use that hypothetical that we've been addressing here tonight to show the complexity of that. What you've heard from these folks are that they may not be in compliance with the noise ordinance. They may be, and I'm just saying that that's sort of the argument, and that their concern is that someone might move in and use this property as residential property and they have a complaint. It's a lot of what ifs, and you're now going to take someone who's asking for a zoning request and put the what ifs on them as a burden. And there is a question whether that's fair in due process.
Okay.
Okay to ask a question.
I asked a question earlier.
Are we able to?
If you want to allow them to ask questions or whatever, and you want to decide how you want to respond to that, okay? So keep in mind, you had a hearing.
Yeah.
And we've done all of that. This body is now trying to make its decision. I don't want to tell you how to do that, but it's up to this chair's decision as to whether you want to, again, engage in a discussion and additional information.
Yeah.
And we do have a motion on the floor.
We do have a motion on the floor. I would like to set aside the motion for a moment and hear from the public.
Yeah, Bryce, I asked the question earlier why this property you feel was zoned initially as CMU. And then, spot zoning should only be done if it's in the public's best interest. And I do not see where having more people in this lot is better than having fewer. I don't know where else in the city you can draw a line across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 adjacent properties and they're all zoned differently. So can you please address that, Bryce?
So as far as how it was initially, zoned for commercial, I don't know the entire history. As far as I can see, in 2013, before we switched to our new zoning code, it was zoned for B4 general commercial district. So it has been commercial for at least 10 years. And then I believe that I spoke with a nearby property owner that said that it's been business for quite a while. However, I think with over time, as things have kind of developed in that area, and also there's a new need for more housing, this is where I think it's a good opportunity to consider whether or not this area is more suitable for medium family or medium density residential as opposed to commercial. So for an extreme example, if someone wanted to put a drive-through in, they could do that. I don't think that this is necessarily a great site for a lot of the uses that are allowed in the CMU district. Whereas for the MR12, that would allow for more housing in a kind of a transitional area. So a lot of times what we see in a lot of communities is in between business districts and residential districts, especially single and two family. A lot of times you'll see kind of a multifamily or higher density. And in this case, you can consider townhouses to be multifamily. So that's kind of a common practice to kind of have a transitional zone in between more intensive commercial, which would be the Merriwood property or Fleet Farm, and then, transitioning into the single family, two family to the east. As for the spot zoning comments, that is one term that's commonly not really understood by a lot of people, because if you ask, a number of people what a spot zone is, you'll get a number of different answers. Generally, what's accepted is that just because it would be the only MR12 zoning district in that, that vicinity, doesn't necessarily matter. It matters what the comprehensive plan recommends and what the future land use map recommends. And so in this case, it recommends that it could be suitable for commercial uses, or it could also be suitable for medium density residential. So that's ultimately the question, is whether or not they think that it's, whether or not the Plan Commission feels that this area is suitable for residential. In my opinion, I believe that this would be a good location to kind of create that transition to the, neighborhoods to the east, commercial area. We do need land, or we do need more, housing. So that's kind of a key consideration from the comprehensive plan recommendations. And then on top of that, as the applicant had mentioned, Fleet Farm, is intending to only sell for residential. So it's a matter of what type of residential. And as Mr. Caprillion has mentioned earlier, apartments would be allowed in the CMU district. They would have to go through a CUP. So there could ultimately be residential in that area, no matter what, whether this is approved or denied. But I feel like it's more appropriate to be multifamily residential than a property that could be a hotel, a large box store, which, obviously that's not something that's going to probably happen because it's not prime real estate for those. But that's just kind of the permitted uses that I just don't see those as being more appropriate than medium density residential.
Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll go back to the motion we have on the floor with the amendment that Mr. Pyle suggested. Is there any further discussion from the commission? Hearing none, call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item, review, discuss possible extension of the attached 2013 cooperative boundary plan between the city of Marshfield and the town of McMillan.
Thank you. So, unfortunately, I thought that City Administrator Steve Bard would be at this meeting, so I thought he was going to bring this up. But we did have the town of McMillan reached out to us about extending the the joint boundary plan between the city of Marshfield and the town of McMillan. We do have a joint plan commission. I think the plan runs out actually in October of 2023, and I think probably this week at some point. So they reached out to us about possibly, going through, updating the plan, whether that's extending that for, I think, a 10-year period is what was suggested. And so I believe that we wanted to just get feedback to see from the Plan Commission if this is something that we want to entertain. In the past, we've had relatively few meetings with the Joint Plan Commission just because of staff turnover. But some of the things that we would review are extraterritorial CSM. So when someone would have a CSM in a certain district near the city of Marshfield, but located in the town of McMillan, the Joint Plan Commission would meet and just would have to approve or deny or give feedback. We also met to discuss some of the changes, our new bike and pedestrian plan that we adopted, I believe, 2 years ago. So we worked with the town of McMillan to kind of identify, some shared routes and some potential funding opportunities in the future. So as far as I know, I think we just wanted to kind of gauge the Plan Commission's interest in whether or not we want to extend that or if we want to have that dissolve at some point.
Okay. Any commentary from the commission on this item?
To be honest, I didn't even know it existed. So I'd be very curious if it is something that is even worth moving forward. Someone would have to give us some input on this, I guess. I'm completely oblivious to.
Yeah, and one thing we could also do is we could, discuss this at next month's meeting, and we could even include the plan and kind of go over what we looked at. It was adopted in 2013, and it may have been even before 2013, but I know the recent one was 2013. We could certainly kind of go through and discuss it more, and I do believe that the town of McMillan at some point wanted to maybe attend a meeting and discuss that as well. So I think this is more of just an introduction, see if anyone had any initial thoughts, and then we can kind of get into a little bit further. I can certainly look at including that plan at the next meeting if that's what you guys would prefer.
Could we get a packet of information or something on it with a little more detail, maybe, ahead of time?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Is this in the comprehensive plan or referenced in it, or?
So it's not in the comprehensive plan, but it is on our city website.
Oh, okay.
It should be under our planning document.
For what it's worth, I've been periodically over my course of time on the Plan Commission for City of Marshfield. I've been assigned to the Joint Plan Commission with the town of McMillan, and there is some productive benefit to having this agreement in place because it gives us the opportunity to give our input and affect some decisions that the township would be making that would have some impact on the city that's in that boundary district. So generally, I'm in favor of maintaining that relationship and participating in that with them. My own 2 cents.
It's in here.
And then just a quick high level. So I found the plan. It is on our website under the planning division, your development services. So some of the things that we look at is we identify the joint planning area. So we identified a cooperative planning area, a no contest area, and then you can see this is where the city of Marshfield is. So there are some parts of the town that would not be able to be annexed. And then there are other parts where, if someone from the town wanted to annex into the city, the town of McMillan would not be able to deny it. They could obviously, voice concerns, but so there are some benefits to that. We also do have within this plan, there is a future land use for the planning area. So that kind of generally identifies, okay, here's where commercial could be located, here's where there's going to be rural residential. So there have been benefits, and it is kind of a good way to connect with the town and kind of have, a relationship with them as we, kind of grow. The city has kind of grown more to the north. So we kind of wanted to maintain, a good relationship with the town.
Yeah. So, Bryce, I'm not sure what we're looking for from the commission on this.
Yep, no action today. I was just going to see if anyone had any thoughts. Now, obviously, with only, I think, John, you're probably the only one that's, truly familiar with it. What we can do is we can come back and just discuss it next month. I can, provide the plan. And then I'll also talk with Steve Barr to see if a representative from the town would like to attend, because they were kind of the ones that wanted to kind of get things rolling. So I'll chat with them, but we wanted to put it on your radar since, the plan was, ending soon.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to item number 12, staff updates. Anything from anyone?
We do not have any updates at this time.
Okay. And number 13, items for future agendas. Any recommendations or suggestions from the commission? No? Okay. I will take a motion to adjourn. Second? All right. We are adjourned.